Welcome back to my channel. I'm Neil Chase, author of Iron Dogs and writer-director of Spin the Wheel. And today I want to talk to you about conflict in your story. I'm going to cover the differences between internal and external conflict and which one is better suited to drive the type of story you're trying to tell. Think about it. What makes a story truly gripping? You know, the kind you just can't put down or stop watching? Is it the hero battling wave after wave of enemies in a test of skill and determination? Or is it the inner struggle to overcome fear and doubt? The truth is, great stories thrive on conflict. To which you might ask, aren't great stories made up of complex characters? Or clever layered dialogue? Or memorable face-offs between heroes and villains? Well, yes. But at the core of all of these is conflict. It's the fuel that keeps your story moving. It creates tension, raises stakes, and forces characters to grow. Without conflict, you don't have complexity of character, or dynamic dialogue, or purposeful action. And without any of those, a story feels flat and directionless. But not all conflict is the same. Broadly speaking, conflict falls into two categories: internal and external. One takes place within a character's mind, while the other plays out in the world around them. Both are powerful, but choosing the right one to drive your story can make all the difference. So what sets internal and external conflict apart? Internal conflict is a character's personal struggle, doubt, fear, guilt, or emotional wounds that shape their choices. It's the difference between action and inaction, the thing that either propels your character forward or keeps them glued to the spot. And the conflict comes from the character not knowing which one they should do, and ultimately being forced to make that choice. Think Hamlet wrestling with indecision about taking revenge for his father's murder, or Frodo battling the increasing corruption within him to complete his quest. External conflict, on the other hand, comes from outside forces, an antagonist, society, nature, or even fate itself. Anything from a parking ticket to a punch to the face to the end of the world. It's as large as the galaxy or as tiny as a virus. It is all of those things that affect the character on a physical level. This is Chuck Nolan fighting to survive on a desolate tropical island in Castaway, or Rocky facing off against Clubber Lang in the middle of the squared circle, taking hit after brutal hit. And while both types of conflict can and should exist in the same story, the primary driver of your narrative depends on the type of experience you want to create for your audience. So what do I mean by that? And how do you decide whether internal or external conflict should take the lead? Here's a breakdown. When it comes to action, adventure, and thrillers, these genres thrive on external conflict. The protagonist typically faces physical challenges, enemies, or dangerous situations. And while they might struggle with those issues on a psychological level, it's the external problems that drive the narrative and their actions. Think Indiana Jones, Mad Max Fury Road, or Die Hard as great examples. Psychological dramas, romance, and literary fiction are stories that are often driven by internal conflict. The character's personal struggles, moral dilemmas, or emotional battles tend to take center stage over physical ones, even when external problems exist. Think of stories like The Great Gatsby, Joker, or Pride and Prejudice. When it comes to fantasy and sci-fi, these genres are interesting because they often find a balance between both types of conflict. The hero typically faces external threats, such as wars, monsters, or dystopian societies, but also internal struggles, such as self-doubt, trauma, and the burden of responsibility. Think of Ned Stark's journey in Game of Thrones, or Eleven's trauma in Stranger Things. In short, those genres that are more action-oriented should be more driven by external conflicts, while still striving to show the inner conflicts that the characters face as a result. While those genres that are more dialogue-oriented should be driven by internal conflicts, where characters battle their own insecurities and flaws while also dealing with some external obstacles. Understanding your genre and theme will help you determine which conflict should take center stage in your story. So now that we know the difference, how do you create realistic and relatable conflict that keeps your audience engaged? Well, let's break it down. When it comes to writing strong internal conflict, tie it to the character's backstory. A character's past should inform their struggles. If your protagonist has unresolved trauma, guilt, or regrets, these elements should shape their decisions throughout the story. Think of Bruce Wayne's fear and guilt over his parents' murder in Batman. His entire persona as a vigilante stems from this internal wound. Next, make it a source of difficult choices. The best internal conflicts force characters into moral dilemmas where no choice is entirely right or wrong. For example, Walter White in Breaking Bad, having to choose between his family and his criminal empire. His internal struggle between being a provider for his family and his own growing thirst for power drives the narrative. And lastly, show it through action, not just thoughts. Instead of having characters merely think about their struggles, let their conflict influence their actions, dialogue, and relationships. For example, think of Tony Stark's battle with PTSD and survivor's guilt in Iron Man. His internal conflict manifests through erratic behavior, isolation, and an over-reliance on technology. And when it comes to writing strong external conflict, start by creating a worthy antagonist. A strong villain or opposing force makes external conflict more intense. They should challenge the hero's strength and force them to grow. For example, Thanos in Avengers Infinity War has a clear ideology and presents an overwhelming threat that forces the heroes into action. Next, make the stakes clear. The audience should understand exactly what's at risk and why the protagonist must fight. Stakes don't always have to be global destruction. They can be deeply personal as well. Think of the survival stakes in The Walking Dead as a great example. Every encounter with zombies, or other survivors, presents a new and immediate danger. And finally, let conflicts escalate. Conflicts should grow in intensity, forcing the protagonist to make harder choices as the story progresses. Think of John Wick's never-ending fight against assassins in the films. Each battle he faces raises the stakes and puts him in greater danger. So let's look at some of the greatest stories that masterfully balance both types of conflict. In There Will Be Blood, Daniel Plainview's external conflict is his ruthless rise in the oil industry, but his internal conflict, his growing isolation and greed, becomes his undoing. In Arrival, Dr. Louise Banks faces the external challenge of decoding an alien language, while internally struggling with profound personal revelations about time, fate, and loss. In No Country for Old Men, Sheriff Bell's external conflict involves the violent crimes of Anton Chigurh, but his deeper struggle is his growing disillusionment with the modern world and his own inadequacy within it. In Pan's Labyrinth, Ophelia battles the brutal external world of fascist Spain and her abusive stepfather, but her internal conflict revolves around whether to embrace her fairy tale destiny or succumb to despair. In Children of Men, Theo's external conflict is navigating a collapsing society, while his internal conflict is rekindling hope after years of cynicism and loss. These examples show that the most powerful stories don't just rely on one type of conflict. They use both in layered ways, typically with one primary form of conflict driving all others, and the story as a whole. So, should internal or external conflict drive your story? Well, it all depends on the kind of story you want to tell and the type of experience you want to create for your audience. If you're writing an action-packed thriller, external conflict might take the lead. If you're diving deep into character psychology, internal conflict should be at the heart of your story. But remember, the best stories often blend both. Internal struggles make external battles more meaningful, and external obstacles bring out a character's deepest fears and desires. But hey, these are just my 2 cents. Give me yours. Let me know in the comments below which type of conflict you find the best for immersing yourself into the story. And if you're looking for a genre story driven by external forces and layered with internal struggles, then you'll love my novel Iron Dogs. Or if you prefer a psychological thriller centered around internal conflicts with key moments of external challenges, then my latest film Spin the Wheel is out now on Tubi. And as always, if you're looking for more unique storytelling tips to take your fiction to the next level, click that like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell to stay updated with the latest content. Until next time, stay creative.